not a normal line of work to do scheduled death. Now, as a police officer, look, you're going to do, or even a citizen, if you see a crime in progress, you're not even going to care about your own safety. You're going to jump in front of a bullet. You're going to jump into a burning home to save somebody's life. But that's not the way the death penalty is held out. It's long process to finally get there, and drama's really built up.
It's the slowest quick death in the world.
Yeah.
This is going to hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
You go through, you get yourself sober.
Yes.
You're in the Department of Corrections. You start this trash business as your side hustle, and it turns out to be this life-changing thing because you're ultra successful.
Yes.
But you're an addict, all right? And no matter what it is, addicts put the full force of everything they are behind whatever they're doing, whatever their focus is. Like
and New York, it wasn't too far behind them at this point either.
True. And you're that heat-seeking missile, like you say. And you become this heat-seeking missile towards the garbage business, and it's ultra successful, enough so where you're able to leave the Department of Corrections.
I did.
And was that more for a soul healing than this business opportunity with the garbage business?
You know what happened? It was really simple. I was going back and forth because, I had moved up quite a bit. I mean, I only had, the Department of Corrections, the penitentiary had 500 staff. And I answered to the associate warden who answered to the warden. And basically, I was like the Fauci of corrections. No way, nobody tells Fauci anything to do. That's the way I was. So it was very hard for me to leave. But what happened was, when 9/11 happened on that Tuesday, I looked and thought about every one of those souls that was lost, had no idea they're going to lose their life. And at that point forward, I said to myself, I am never living in limbo. And I was living in limbo. Do I stay with corrections? Do I keep on working the business? And I decided that day that I was done. Now, I put my 2-week notice in, and I don't even know if it was a 2-week notice. I put my resignation notice in on a Wednesday. And they did everything they could to try to talk me out of it. The economy might be changed by this. This job is always going to be here. And I said to myself, I didn't live in fear. I said, no. I said, this was part of my life. I have to close this door. And I had an interesting, deal on corrections. I mean, Kevin, just one thing I did on a death row inmate. It's got 3.5 million listens on the internet.
I'll throw a shout out to Trendifier on that one for Julian Dory.
Yeah, that's short.
That's a great short because he does it in such a way where you feel you have this ability when you're speaking about things like this to show the humanity.
Yes.
Where you're not that robot behind that glass. This guy's about to die, and you just give him a little bit of...
and unless you've been in that situation, I know people want a bloodthirsty for the criminals, and I agree, man. If somebody hurt my family or anybody, I have the same empathy. Listen, with my family, if I hear something happens, but at the end of the day, when you schedule an execution at the exact moment, this darkness is coming to the prison at a certain time. And you never think you're going to sign up for a job that has you get your hands that involved in something. So I'm glad that's behind me. It definitely is not something that I look back at with any happiness.
Like you said, even those death row inmates, they're people too. And they have family.
They do. And you feel for the family, and the victims never feel better after we execute them.
That's the big
There's
thing.
no closure to it.
There's no closure.
No.
Yeah.
There's no closure. And, I got to tell you, I learned a lot from those guys as we talked in that. But I learned a lot from those guys because I spent a lot of time with them with their visits. And
it's a lesson in psychology.
It's a lesson in psychology. And you know what I learned about murderers? That can happen to anybody. The people today that are walking around today can do that tomorrow. You just never know when somebody's going to flip the lid and do something like that. So
we're always one step away.
So
how much did that shut down your emotional capacity dealing day in and day out? You're in recovery.
Yes.
You're in recovery, and your emotions, where you went from anesthetizing your emotions with drugs and alcohol, and you got to guard yourself against that.
Look, it's surreal. You don't hear about this often. You hear wardens talking. You never hear the staff members talk because they always got a lid on them. When you know someone is going to die at a certain time, at a scheduled death, and they know the process because they've been told what's going to happen to them, and you're doing their last visit, you feel like you're dying. You literally feel like you got a date with that electric chair. You got a date with that gurney. And now that's the lethal injection. But when I was doing the work, it was the electric chair. It is heavy, and I tell you this, the people I know that were part of the death squad, they all had health problems. They all drank. It's just not a normal line of work to do scheduled death. Now, as a police officer, look, you're going to do, or even a citizen, if you see a crime in progress, you're not even going to care about your own safety. You're going to jump in front of a bullet. You're going to jump into a burning home to save somebody's life. But that's not the way the death penalty is held out. It's long process to finally get there, and drama's really built up.
It's the slowest quick death in the world.
Yeah. And if
I mean, how many people are on death row for like years?
Yeah,
and appeals.
I think
and
the minimum is
appeals.
10 years. Minimum.
And for the people that don't know, it costs more to do the death penalty. We found that there are people that are innocent. I was there when a guy got off the death penalty.
Yeah.
For those that like to Google, Jeremy Sheets got off of the death penalty, and it was a part of my life that I wish I never had to experience.
I mean, could you imagine that guy? He's sentenced to death,
Getting off.
and then he winds up, and then they find out that he's not the one who did it.
He may or may not.
It happens all the time.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
But the thing is this, I just wish I would have had a regular life sometimes. But then I wouldn't have wrote 14th and 2nd, and the reader is going to hear a bunch of stories that make them, at the end of the day, reflect on their life. And if they got some struggling points or they got some things, I think it's going to be a motivator for
But
them.
more importantly, you wouldn't have met us.
No, I wouldn't have met
If you were
guys.
just Charlie from the street,
No.
you would have never met us.
No.
And
There's the serendipity that we do talk about often on here. But you are also known, you are the father of somebody very famous.
Yes.
You are the father of Star, the New York Pit Bull.
Yes.
Who was shot at 14th and 2nd.
14th and 2nd.
Which is, oddly enough, where you used to get your drugs.
I used to get drugs at 14th and 2nd also. How's that?
So the universe brought you back
To 14th and
to
2nd.
14th and 2nd in some form or fashion to take this guy who used to be anesthetized with drugs and alcohol, who was now anesthetized through life experience, who was kind of shut down black, white. And the cool thing about this book is you're following two different paths, and you're reading these two different paths from Star's journey to, we all know from the last episode, Star was shot in the eye, but survived. And you're waiting for them to collide.
Right.
These two separate worlds to collide. And what I think is that is your birth. That's how I see it.
It really was. And August 13th of 2012, to bring you there, I was at my desk. Kevin, I was so far from the guy I am today. I had blocked out my past. All I thought about was making money.
This episode's going to air right around the 10-year anniversary of the shooting of Star, the New York Pit Bull.
Wow.
Isn't that,
Wow.
once again, the universe opens up and shows us what's possible.
It shows us what happened. So, I'm in Nebraska at my desk. And I'm going to open up the internet and I'm going to read the New York papers because I never stopped reading what was going on in New York.
that's what I was saying before. New York never left them. That's what I was
Never left
getting
me.
at.
And I was going to read a story on the internet that a dog was shot and killed, and a homeless man went into a seizure that had a drug problem.
Lex Stankiewicz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my life would be changed forever because I didn't realize it at the time. I was reading the story of my life. And this dog had to live. And although the headline said the dog died, and everybody said the dog died, I believe the dog lived all the ways from Nebraska, and this happened all the ways in the East Village in New York City.
And the story of how you track this dog down is
That's what I was going to say too. Is that where like maybe your addiction kicked in again? You almost became addicted with rescuing Star the dog.
Look, here's the deal. I've always thought like a cop because I had to survive on the streets. Mm-hmm. So I'm always watching. I'm always looking. I mean, I was a professional guy. And if you're an addict, you don't want to be arrested. You want to go forward. So I used every bit of street smarts I had, everything I learned in the Department of Corrections. And let's face it, guys that are in this line of work either have cops as friends or guys that are former inmates as friends. I mean, they just go hand in. Even though you don't understand how it happens, you have the reformed felons that are your friends, and you have people that work in the police. I mean, that's just what happens. And you think smartly and you think streetwise.
these worlds collide, and I just see your life change because while you have looked after all these dogs and found companionship, this dog was essentially, again, this is my extrapolation of what I see out of there. This dog is the manifestation of Charlie Cifarelli.
Yes, it came back.
And came back. and came back
Guys,
happier.
do you realize how big of a deal? I mean, the police were even saying a day later the dog is dead, and even if it did live,
I've unfortunately watched the video.
even if the dog did live, it wouldn't. The dog came back and lived this incredible life, and basically, I got a childhood. So I got to tell you, right after that dog came back to life, and I wound up adopting her many, many months later after a legal tug of war and red tape and everything that went on to get this dog. Because the dog lawyered up when she was initially shot. I don't know how a dog lawyers up. Then the dog was put in a witness protection program with a new name and stuck down in Philadelphia. And all this crazy, crazy stuff happened. But you know what? I was attached to this dog. And I was going to rescue this dog, give it a home, have a significant other that would back me 200%.
Oh, by the way, she's the heroine of the story.
Oh, without a doubt, Jen.
Because all the bullshit that you put her
Oh.
through, you'll find out in here. It's like, Charlie, come to bed. Stop looking for this dog.
Yeah.
Charlie, another dog. Come on,
Listen,
Charlie.
I got to say this. You know, there's Lassie and there's Rin Tin Tin, but Star, the New York Pit Bull, is the story of 2022. Because when you think about it, now the way life is, why wouldn't the hero of the story be a one-eyed pit bull that's missing part of its skull? I mean, it all makes sense now, how all this came together. But the dog, because of her demeanor, no one ever asked me what kind of dog that is. I mean, when I did wonderful things with her and took her to Alzheimer's, she's been to college classes with me to teach journalism. I would suggest anybody listening to this, just Google Star the dog on Wikipedia. Not only is there a documentary made about her, the luckiest dog that ever lived came back to life. Not only did a music producer make a song about her, Star's journey. Children's book has been written for her by Jen. Cartoon book.
Which has something like 70 million listens.
She's got like 70 million listens on this song that has gone global.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Unbelievable.
the documentary, I got to be honest with you. Let's focus on this book because this book is going places. When you read this book, I see everything in my head, and that's the mark of a good book. It's a page turner.
Right.
You got to. I've started reading books and haven't stopped. I've done that a few times because it just doesn't grab me. The way this book grabs you, there is no way in the world. If Hollywood doesn't come knocking for this book, they're out of their mind. If I had enough funding, I would make this book. I would make this movie.
I think the book, Kevin, what you're talking about is I think that every person wants the underdog to win. And I think we all have a little underdog in us.
That's why we want you. You were the underdog, Charlie.
I think we all, I mean, let's just think about this for a second.
Oh, Cinderella Man. That's all you
think
want to
about
do.
Or think about this. Everybody, I'm not even a horse race guy, but who didn't jump up and down when Rich Strike won the Kentucky Derby? A horse with no chance, 70 to 1, 72 to 1, a horse that didn't have much value. We all want the underdog to win. And also, I think that when a reader reads this, I don't care how successful you are in this life. I don't care if you came over in a Mayflower. There's been parts of your life that have been unfair. And this book talks about that. There are some really successful people that I've met because of the dog, because of these podcasts.
You met governors and everything.
I've met
because of
the
the dog.
governor, president, federal judges, Supreme Court judge, you name it, I've met them. But more importantly, I've gotten people to have confidence in me and say stuff to me that they too were not treated fairly. And when you know that and we come together, you're like, wow, we've been suffering in silence.
Has anybody in this life been treated fairly their whole lives? You know, it's all how
not.
you
When you read,
absorb that and repurpose it.
when our audience reads this book, they're going to realize that maybe they, as bad as you had it, you might not have had it that bad. Charlie's had it pretty rough.
You know, it's funny you should say this because a buddy of mine, again, a cop, and another cop read it. So we were on like a three-way, and my buddy that's the cop says to me, yeah, Charlie, we all had a tough time in the 60s and 70s. It's lucky we lived. And then the other cop said to him, you haven't read the book yet. Meaning that, yeah, this is, guys like me generally don't bounce back. Generally. And if they do, they are limited. Because remember, I know a lot of addicts. There was a lot of stuff that happened to me that would have stopped me from progressing and having success. Now, I had success in business, and there's been plenty of addicts that could say, well, I was an addict in the streets, still an addict, but then I turned around and got into business. But I had the awakening, and I call it the Jimmy Stewart awakening in It's a Wonderful Life,
Right.
to realize that my happiness is not somebody else's happiness. See, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. So the problem I started noticing when I made money was, I remember me and Jen, I wanted to buy one of those Mercedes AMGs when I made some money. And when I got to the car dealership, the guy said, well, why wouldn't you want a Bentley? It never ended. And it never ended. So that pursuit of happiness is really an uncomfortable one. And I see it's chased all over the place.
Because people are looking for love in all the wrong places.
They're looking for love in all the wrong places.
They're looking for love in a big wallet.
Yeah.
And, I mean, listen, I'm sure money can make you happy, but it's personal happiness.
Well,
it's internal happiness that's going to really make you happy.
But here's what I've noticed, and I've done this. I've hired many homeless people over the course of my life. And when they get on their feet, they're very grateful. But human nature, after a few weeks of not being homeless anymore, eating regular, being part of my business, they be complaining about something.
It's nice to see somebody who has faith in humanity.
I have to.
It really is. Now, has your brother read this book yet?
He knows about the book as it was being built, as it was being made. He's gotten different parts of it, yes.
And what somebody who was so intimately involved in that, I know your brother's somewhat younger than you.
Yes, 9 years younger than me.
But what were his thoughts? Was he afraid that you were going to put this out and destroy the family legacy?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Matter of fact, he always saw me as someone that protected the family reputation, where he basically just parted company and said no.
Well, you said he changed his last name, right?
He changed his last name. Now, the other thing that happened, which was really interesting, you never know who's watching you. So the book is on Amazon, and it gets bought, and I look at the reviews. Well, my older cousin, who was very close to my father, she knew him when she was growing up because, she's 71, and that would have been closer to my father's age. He's probably, if he were alive today, died in 18, he'd be 89. So I didn't know how she'd respond. So instead of calling me, she made a review. And it felt good. She said, I read the book and everything in it has, it is what it is. It's true. It's just unfortunate. It was an unfortunate situation.
How do we get this book?
Simple. 14th and 2nd on Amazon. And, if somebody wants one signed, and I would never say this, but people do ask that. I mean, they do ask that. They want it personalized. And what better gift to give somebody that's struggling if you have a family member, somebody.
Give them the gift of hope.
Give them the gift of hope. So if the show notes will have it, and we'll get a book out to them. I think it's, I think it's a great place for people to start that want to tackle some problems in their life and open their mind to the fact that they're not alone and there is a solution.
And, this book's got legs, Charlie. This book has legs. I'm telling you now, this book is going to go somewhere. How can our audience reach out to you?
Well, I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Charlie Cifarelli, show notes for that.
Sure.
I do respond to messages,
Yes, you do.
I do respond to messages.
Every time I comment on Charlie's always responding back to me.
I think we owe that to people that take time for us. And
so you've had several posts up there where you posted something up, and I like it on Instagram, and you'll call me up and say, hey, that post you just liked?
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you. This has happened.
Yeah.
You know that post you just like? Well, let me tell you the backstory behind it. And it's cool because I have my own little personal podcast with Charlie, getting all the cool backstories to everything.
You know what's really nice? Here's the gift that I got. So I went off to college, prison. Then I was in my trash business, and I always wanted to come back to the East Coast, to be here with you guys tonight, New Jersey guys in New Jersey. And I got to tell you something. This New York guy was never open to New Jersey. New Jersey may have it on New York. I'm going to tell you why.
I might argue that point, but go ahead.
I'm going to tell you why. I think the New Jersey people are a little bit more sane, man. I mean, I think there's more saneness out here than there is in at least the Long Island part that I grew up in. It was 5 boroughs.
New Jersey, we can get away from the insanity.
Yes.
The insanity is only right across the river. We want a little sanity. We can stay here. We want.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Charlie Cifarelli right now, and I'm looking at the man who walked in our studio 9-10 months ago like this. You were sitting there like this. Look at you now.
Yeah.
I can see it in your eyes. The same way that guy did on the train,
Yes.
probably saw that in your eyes. I see the life in your eyes. I'm so proud of you, Charlie. I'm going to always be your biggest fan and your biggest cheerleader when it comes to this stuff.
You know, as Kevin knows, I'm a big quote guy, and I saw a quote this week, and I really thought about you when I saw it. It said, "We have 2 lives, and the second one begins when we realize we only have one."
Boy, that's powerful.
I mean, I thought about you right away when I saw that.
Man, you're pulling these things out of your ass
Mike,
today.
that is
Go back to the social media question again. I mean, come on, where do I get these things from?
Mike, that's powerful. And, here's the thing with a podcast. We're reaching a lot of people. And you know what? There is somebody who's going to listen to this that's going to identify. I think that we could save a life because...
Yeah, the Suffering Podcast is reaching tens of people.
Well, it's reaching a lot more.
Family members.
Charlie, we're coming to the end of this thing here, and as you did on your first episode, I'm going to ask this question and pose this question to you. You've written this wonderful book, 14th and 2nd, and you've gone through this whole entire life, which is hard to believe that it's true, but I know that it is because I've heard the provenance in it. What do you think it's taught you?
It's taught me that suffering is not the end all, that there is a life after suffering. But what we don't know is when we're suffering, we think that it's never going to come to an end. And we don't realize that when we get outside of that tunnel, when we get back into the light, we're not alone, man. You guys talk about this. There are so many people that are suffering alongside us, but they're doing what I did. They're not talking. They're not opening their mouth. I think that the future of suffering will be different. I think people won't have the muzzle where they don't say anything. I think the future, people are going to get a lot more open with this.
We're repurposing the word suffering.
Another quote I got this week, too, which I thought about, which is perfect for this podcast. If you focus on the hurt, you'll continue to suffer. If you focus on the lesson, you'll continue to grow.
Perfect.
Charlie, thank you so much for coming here again. And you're going to be one of our evergreen guests. It's just whenever you want to come in.
Listen, there's an open door policy for you. You know
I love
that.
it.
You know that.
Always.
I mean, it was
here.
just a chance meeting where we got to meet Charlie, and it was I tell him all, you're one of the greatest people I ever met.
You know what, guys? I appreciate that, and I tell you, there's no coincidences, and the fact that this is happening it's been so good for me, and it's because it's been good for me. That means I'm going to continue to pour my cup into others.
I don't believe in coincidences, and we spoke about that with Pastor Ron Lewis last week. So the book is 14th and 2nd. You'll be able to find it on Amazon. It's a wonderful book. Leave a review on Amazon. Reach out to the Suffering Podcast. Reach out to Charlie. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the Suffering of 14th and 2nd. Thank you so much, Charlie, for coming in.
Charlie, always a pleasure. You know that. You're always welcome here.
Thank you.
We'll kick him out. We'll bring you in this time.
You could be Kevin's co-host.
But let's think about all the stuff that we learned today.
Before you get into the things you learned, it's something I learned today. You said you had a degree in literature?
Yes.
I didn't know Marvel Comics gave out degrees in literature.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for your vote of confidence. Well, let's think about all the stuff that I've learned today. Number one, life is transactional. Anonymity can make you suffer. Comparison is the thief of joy. Abuse causes resistance to success. See? Random acts of kindness have a great impact. But most importantly, live every day like it's your last.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the Suffering of 14th and 2nd. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow Mike on Instagram at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we will see you on the next episode of the Suffering Podcast.